World Bank prepared several country-specific core diagnostics report, and poverty and equity assessment is one of those type of reports. And we prepared this for Tonga specifically this year. And this is, I said, kind of rare in this Pacific region because many Pacific Island countries tend to face data challenges which prohibited us from preparing this kind of deep dive country-specific report. Instead, we tend to combine like a 9 Pacific country report, etc. For example. So, and so what I said was basically, so the government, Tonga Statistics Department, TSD, already published poverty report last year using their 2021 household income and expenditure survey highest. And they reported around 21% of people lived in poverty, monetary poverty as of 2021. So what's new in this report is we also imputed poverty using their previous highs collected in 2015-16 to establish a comparable poverty statistics, so poverty trends, and then analyze what was the driving force for changes in poverty during the period, and also develop some policy recommendations. So that's what's new in this report. And now here. So before explaining details about findings in this report, I want to give you a quick overview of key messages. So first and foremost, monetary poverty. To full screen. Okay. Yeah. So first and foremost, poverty declined during the period from 2015 to 21 in Tonga, and this is a great achievement considering the multiple shocks the country experienced during the period. For example, tropical cyclone Skita in 2018 and Harold in 2020, and also COVID-19 pandemic outbreak in 2020 as well. So the Tonga achieved a sizable poverty reduction. So the monetary poverty rate declined from 27.4% in 2015 to around 21% in 2021. So it was a 6-7 percentage point reduction. That was a huge reduction in monetary poverty. And also, if we look at the various non-monetary poverty indicators, asset ownership or access to services, etc., also we observed various improvements during the period. So non-monetary poverty also improved, and also inequality declined during the period. So the story sounds perfect, but and the question is why, right? So how come the country achieved such a strong, robust poverty reduction during the tough times? And we look at the data to investigate driving forces, and what we found basically remittances contributed a lot to poverty reduction in Tonga during the period. So because of labor mobility, accelerating labor mobility, and also there's tons of Tongan diaspora outside the country, including Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. So the remittances they sent to families in Tonga have been also rapidly increasing during the period, which supported income and ultimately consumption of households remaining in Tonga during the period and reducing poverty at the aggregated level. So that was kind of the evidence we found. But our key message is of course, the government should further promote labor mobility while dealing with negative effects stemming from certain rapid labor mobility. For example, addressing potential shortages of labor forces, and also dealing with some negative social effects imposed, for example, on children and women. But at the same time, it's really important to diversify their economy and income as a safeguard against shocks, natural hazards and economic shocks. So to do that, what we recommend was basically to invest in human capital to deal with skills mismatches in the country, and also diversify the economy, and also develop functioning social protection system to provide support to people. This is particularly important in the case of disaster events. So developing so-called adaptive social protection system is crucial for the country to sustain poverty reduction. So that's a key message coming out of this report. So I'm gonna elaborate on each of these points in my rest of the presentation. Yeah, but the key fact, we are offering is poverty decline during the period. So again, this is not new. As I said, the government already reported this in the report prepared by TSD and also SPC, Pacific Community. And also just to let you know, the World Bank also financed their 2021 highs. And also the next highs is coming next year, so in Tonga. So, but just to give you a snapshot of up-to-date poverty statistics in Tonga, so as of 2021, so the way they measured poverty was based on household consumption expenditure and also cost of basic needs poverty line. So comparing these two, they identify who is poor, who is non-poor, and then they found around 21% of the population was facing monetary poverty. So, and we followed the way the government measured poverty. So we didn't invent anything. We just took their approach and used their results basically. But if and the poverty line was set to around 6,000 Tonga Paunga per adult per year, according to the government, capturing both food and non-food consumption. And there's a regional pattern, of course, as shown in the panel C. So the Tonga Tapu is the main island, the capital island in the country, with a kind of lowest poverty rate. Like in urban Tonga Tapu, like around 13% of the population was poor as of 2021. But if you look at some remote islands, next slide, yeah, so like Tonga Tapu is here, and if you go farther north, like there's an island group called Ongoniwa. Around 1/3 of the population was poor at the time. But given the population concentration in the capital island, anyway, 2/3 of the poor population in the country are still living in the capital island. So despite the lowest poverty rate. And okay.
Sorry, Shohei, just for context, what would the 6,000 top line be roughly compared to your other lines in USD PPP?
So this is a very similar to the upper middle income poverty line by World Bank, like in US dollars around $7 PPP. So it's so the poverty rate is 21 or 2% based on the World Bank poverty line. So it's very close. Yeah.
So much lower if you go to the really low extreme lines.
Yeah, like if you use the extreme poverty line, like a $2, and it's almost zero. Okay. Yeah, Tonga is zero. No extreme poverty. Yeah. So, but that's also related to the last bullet on this slide. So we also compared Tonga's poverty and inequality levels to other countries in the region and also outside the region using a PPP conversion rate and also the internationally comparable poverty line set by the World Bank. So like a $6.85 poverty line. And actually Tonga's poverty and inequality levels are lower compared to other countries with similar per capita GDP level. And also, yeah, even lower than other like Asian countries, like very comparable to like Vietnam or China, for example. So, and inequality is much lower. So that's a kind of international comparison. So, but I'm not gonna explain too much about it. So if you are interested, you can download the report. So you can find some interesting charts for international comparison, for example. And also, if you are interested how poverty or consumption was aggregated, and I'm happy to explain methodology maybe in the Q&A session. So, but anyway, so yeah, this is what's new in our report. So the reason why measuring poverty in 2015-16 survey was difficult was the poverty, well, the income measurement is very sensitive to the way household survey is constructed. So if the design of the survey changes, actually, you can easily lose comparability. And also the way questions are organized, also that's heavily influencing the result. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the government improved their survey quality and methodology during the period, comparing these two surveys. So in 2021, they adopted globally established best practice approach. For example, using tablet and changing from the diary estimate of consumption to recall-based estimate. So, but because of these improvements, the consumption aggregate and the poverty coming from these two surveys are no longer comparable. So that's why we need to employ some kind of statistical approach to impute poverty comparable during the period. So the way we did is we kind of use the survey-to-survey imputation technique. So using the 2021 household survey, we kind of created a poverty prediction model based on some key predictors like age, sex, education, etc. Then using that apply that prediction model to the 2015-16 survey data to impute new household consumption and then measuring poverty. So that's the way we did, and that's a kind of common strategy World Bank applies for many other countries when there's a loss in comparability between surveys. But anyway, the results are shown in panel A for poverty trends and also panel B for inequality trends. So if we look at the poverty trend, in panel A, at the national level, so the poverty rate or the percentage of people in poverty was around 27.4%. That went down to 20.6% in 2021. So this is, as I mentioned, this is a really sizable reduction. And we observe, similar trends, in rural areas, orange dashed line, and also in urban areas, a blue solid line. So in those areas, we saw a reduction anyway in poverty, monetary poverty. And similarly, when we look at the inequality trends based on the standard Gini coefficient, consumption Gini coefficient, so basically the higher the more unequal. So the Gini coefficient also declined at the national level from 28.4 to 27.1, and the inequality also declined in rural areas as well. But in urban area, there's a slight maybe a decrease, but that was not statistically significant. But anyway, this period, achieved kind of proper change, basically. Poverty declined and also inequality declined. And we also looked at non-monetary poverty indicators. So here I show some interesting statistics, but we observed improvement in various other indicators as shown in the main report. But just to show you some, for example, percentage of people having access to flush toilet increased from 82 to 89% during the period, and also car ownership increased dramatically during the period, up to 55%. And I guess maybe now I was in Tonga last week, and I saw massive, lots of cars there. And for example, this I just copied a newspaper article saying traffic is a really problem now in this small island. And the question is how people actually purchase, right? So then actually based on remittances, and also many people purchased cars by cash. That's indicating how people becoming wealthy, right? So, and also mobile phone ownership increased to 97%. And in addition to these separate indicators, so the government also measured an aggregated multidimensional poverty statistics using so-called consensual poverty approach. And the official multidimensional poverty rate also declined from 27% to 24%. So so there's a consistent trend. Right? So monetary poverty declined, and also non-monetary poverty also declined. So regardless of the measure we take. Then the big question is, how come? Right? So because when we consider the period from 2015 to 2021, that's a really difficult time. The country experienced multiple tropical cyclones, Gita Harod. So I just quoted some numbers here. So the damages from these cyclones were equivalent to nearly 40% of GDP for Cyclone Gita and 23% of GDP from Harold, for example. And the COVID-19 outbreak in 2020. And so, but just to clarify, in this report, we analyzed more recent data coming from, for example, our high-frequency phone surveys to assess the damage from socio-economic impact from the recent volcanic eruption and the tsunami which took place in 2022. But for our main poverty analysis, because we focused on the period from 2015 to 2021, so the poverty trend itself didn't capture this historic volcanic eruption happened in 2022. That's not included. That's not captured in our poverty estimate. Just to clarify. But anyway, so if you look at the report, you can find various analyses, about this volcanic eruption as well. So, but I'm not going to present in today's presentation. But then, so when we investigated, so what was the driving force for changes in poverty? So we first looked at social protection system or social assistance programs effective in the country at the time. So there were three main programs: the social welfare scheme targeting supporting elderly people, and also the disability welfare scheme supporting people with disabilities, and also the conditional cash transfers (CCT) program supporting poor families with high school students. And we look at them, and the way we kind of assess their potential contribution to poverty was, we did a simple back of the envelope type of calculation. So we look at the household survey data, and because the highest data, recorded the type of benefit each household received and also amount of benefit they received. So we kind of took out those benefits to see how poverty would increase. Right? It's a simple exercise, ignoring any behavioral aspects, but still it's good to see the results. So the baseline poverty was, as I mentioned, to 20.6%. And if we took out one of the programs or all the social assistance programs, poverty would increase 1 percentage point or less. So that's the kind of scale. So it doesn't really kind of make a significant difference in poverty. And there are two main reasons. The first one is not so many poor people received benefit from one of these programs. So the coverage was limited. And also health, and also the average amount of benefit each household received from these programs was also limited. So it was not good enough to lift people out of poverty, even if they received. So because of those two reasons, we didn't really see much discernible impact. But also, just to emphasize, these programs were not designed to reduce poverty. Right? So these programs were designed to support specific people, like elderly people or people with disability or families with high school students. So I'm not blaming these programs not effective to reduce poverty, because that's not the main purpose from the beginning. But anyway, so because we are looking for main driving force, right, for poverty change, this is not likely the one. So. And we also simulated, so if we want to reduce poverty as much as possible, based on only these programs, the government really needs to increase spending on these programs. So so that means so otherwise it's not really possible. These programs made a significant contribution to poverty reduction. And to further think about so the potential driving force for poverty reduction. So we look at the data again, the highest 2021 and also 2015, 16. So the panel A shows so-called growth incidence curve, so showing annual consumption gain over households based on consumption decile. So the 1 to 3 are the basically poorer people, and 8, 9, 10 richer households. And we see a kind of down slope, meaning during the period poorer households gained more. They increased consumption more. And this is consistent to what I already showed, right? So because we observed a reduction in inequality. So because the poorer people actually gained more. So, and also we looked at which type of household experienced a poverty reduction during the period. So that's shown in panel B. So yeah, so maybe it's you can't read the text, but you see a single kind of blue bar standing out. That's actually the poverty reduction, size of poverty reduction came from the households whose heads were not working, like either unemployed or not active labor forces. So this is the type of household poorest, if you look at the data in Tonga, and the massive poverty reduction happened among those poorest people with no jobs. So then that tells us the jobs or labor market is not the issue, right? Because the people gained the most actually didn't work. So yeah, and then we look at the data, and what made the difference is basically remittances, as I mentioned. So Tonga is a really kind of unique country. So if we look at the kind of the amount of remittances, total amount of remittances received by Tongans. So in 2015, around 30, it was like equivalent to around 30% of GDP, and it went up to 45% as of 2021. And if you compare to other countries, it was a world's highest as of 2021, 45%. And as you know, many Tongan people, like a so-called Tongan diaspora, living outside the country, and also seasonal migration has been accelerating thanks to the labor mobility scheme sponsored by the Australia and New Zealand over the last decade. And particularly, there was a spike, during the COVID-19 pandemic to support families, remaining in the country. And the highest data recorded detailed information about remittances. So who received and how much and from where. So I'm showing you some key statistics from the highest here. So around 90% of households received remittances during the last 12 months. If we look at the 2021 highest, which is a bit of, it increased from 84% in 2015-16. So the coverage increased, and nearly 90%, 9 out of 10 households received remittances, so almost universal. And if you look at the average amount of remittances received by Tongan households, that also increased during the period. And also we show some more disaggregated statistics here, but like households headed by unemployed heads or out of labor force heads, and so they kind of increased remittances as well. This is consistent to our finding. Poverty reduction came from this type of poorest households as well. And the population census asked households about very interesting question. So what was the primary source of income for your households? So we look at the data in 2016 census and the 2021 census. So in 2016, around 19% of households said, oh yeah, remittances is our main source of income. And that percentage, jumped to nearly 40% as of 2021. So 40% of households said remittances is the main income. And we also did a kind of back of the envelope calculation again to gauge the potential impact of remittances on poverty. That's not easy. So it's not really sophisticated causal estimate. That's not really possible given the data we have. But just to kind of get a sense about the scale, we did a quick calculation again. So taking out remittances from households randomly in the highest data to see how poverty would increase. So in one scenario, we found like 50% more people could have been poor without remittances. So that's a kind of scale. So it's really making a big difference on people's well-being. So the report describes the methodology more, but I'm not gonna explain in my presentation now. But anyway, So far we observed, remittances played a really significant role in reducing poverty. But our key message in this report is, of course, it's important to further facilitate, but it's also important to diversify the economy and also provide more protection to people against natural and disaster and economic shocks going forward to sustain poverty reduction. So because there are several risks associated with remittances, like exchange rate volatility and etc., but also natural hazards, natural disasters will be becoming more and more intense because of climate change. And given this, we had several recommendations coming out of the report. So I'm going to just talk about two main topics here. So the first one is human capital. So what we recommend is basically to strengthen the human capital base in the country by improving, quality of education and health services. And so if you look at the World Bank Human Capital Index, that's kind of telling us the kind of potential productivity out of the education and health services in the country. So it's here. So the orange bar indicating Tonga's human capital index, which is kind of 53. So it's actually better compared to other Pacific Island countries. It's slightly lower than Samoa, but it's still better than many other Pacific Island countries. But still, there's a room for improvement if you compare to, for example, upper middle income country average. And also skills mismatches, in the country is an issue, the government should really address. So there are so many people not active, in the labor market. Even compared to other Pacific countries, it's really low, particularly among poor people and also women, and particularly married women who need to and with children. So if you look at the data, that's obvious. And there are several reasons why people don't work or don't look for jobs, but because they receive remittances. That's a very obvious reason. They don't have to work. And also, even if they are looking for jobs, if the wage level is lower than the level of wage they could earn when they move to New Zealand or Australia, then maybe they wouldn't dare to work in Tonga, right? So that also basically reservation wage is high. So and also maybe childcare is not easily available, so women, cannot actually work. So there are several reasons. So it's good to address, those, and also not only those supply side factors, there's also a demand side factor. So the World Bank recently conducted a Tonga labor market assessment report, and they interviewed various business owners and employers in Tonga, and so the finding really they're facing a challenge to find workers they want and with desirable skills, and also it's very difficult to keep those workers, because they can easily fly to Australia and New Zealand seeking better opportunities. And so it's really important to identify specific occupations and sectors with better growth prospects, because given the population size or geographic constraints, not all sectors are promising actually in the country. So, for example, tourism would be the really kind of promising sector the government should really focus on and invest more. And the tourism sector requires specific skills, right? So it's important to kind of target, but that's what kind of we recommended. Not only improving education, quality of education and health services, also good to promote kind of training and vocational training, targeting specific sectors. That will be maybe an effective approach. And digitalization, maybe this is a kind of useful for many other Pacific Island countries as well, facing geographic constraints. But promoting digitalization could also support productivity and business job creation, and also it's good for improving education services, promoting e-learning. And I'm going to talk about social protection in the next slide. But social protection is also related to human capital accumulation, because that would provide support to people at the various stages in the life cycle, children to adult and elderly. So yeah, so it's really important to have functioning social protection system from the human capital perspective as well. And the other topic, this report discussed a lot was about social protection system, and or particularly so-called adaptive social protection system, which provide support in the case of disaster event. So, but as I said, the existing social assistance programs didn't really much, support poverty reduction because of the limited coverage and also limited amount of benefit to each beneficiary. So it's really important to better target poor and vulnerable people to make more effective poverty reduction in the country. So yeah, so we simulated how much the government needs to spend more to make a reasonable poverty reduction based on different scenarios. And for example, here, so we particularly looked at the post-disaster poverty situation. So we simulated kind of potential poverty rate after experiencing very severe tropical cyclone. And our poverty estimate is 35%. So if you look at the baseline, it's 35%. And then we simulated, how much this post-disaster poverty could decline depending on the different types of, new cash transfers. So particularly, we looked at, we kind of considered two types of hypothetical cash transfer programs. The first one is a universal cash transfer program, UCT. So basically, the government distributes the same amount of money to everybody. That's a UCT. And UCT, of course, you can reduce, poverty very effectively because you distribute money to all the poor people and also non-poor people as well. But you cover all the poor people. But that's really costly, right? It's a huge amount of money the government needs to spend because they need to also spend money on non-poor people as well. And the more realistic, approach would be poverty targeting cash transfer program. So if there's any mechanism to identify poor or potentially poor people, so the government can actually target those people and more efficiently, spend money on them, right? So we simulated, such approach, but it's not always easy to identify those people, right? There's always targeting error. So we also included some 30% targeting error in our simulation, but still the results show such poverty targeting cash transfers could achieve sizable poverty reduction more effectively and efficiently. So, but in order to implement this, the government needs to know who are those poor people, vulnerable people, and where they are living, right? And that kind of information could come from the so-called social registry. That's a kind of list of individuals the government has, and it can be used for targeting purposes. And then the World Bank is now working with the government to develop this social registry. So it's coming. So, and then the question is whether the government can commit, to kind of disbursing money to those people in need when severe disaster events are happening, right? So that's a key. Quickly identify people and then quickly distributing money to those people in need. That's a way to reduce the impact of natural disasters and poverty. And given the frequency of this and the scale of natural disasters happening in Tonga, this is really important. So basically, that's also just to recap. So our key message is here. So as I mentioned at the beginning, so monetary and non-monetary poverty declined in the country during the period from 2015 to 2021. And we found remittances made a significant contribution to reduction in poverty and inequality. But that said, it's really important to address domestic economy issues, skills mismatches, and also improving human capital base, and also developing effective and adaptive social protection system to provide a safeguard against shocks. Yes, so that's all. Thank you so much. So I'm happy to take any question.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for that. And sorry again for the technical difficulties. I hope everyone can hear. I think everyone could hear second time around. And so we'll have a period of Q&A. And also if you're online, I hope you can ask questions, right? How do they ask questions online? Can they put their hands up?
Yeah, no, if they could enter them into the chat, that would be great.
They can't ask them.
That might be a little bit hard to see.
Okay, so if you're online, if you can write down your questions and then we'll look for them in the chat box. But in the meantime, we have got a question from Tuan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for a very interesting report. And in your report, you show that remittance plays a very important role in poverty reduction. And because of that, you raise the concern about the sustainability, right? Do you have the data? Do you have the section in the report to show how the household use remittance? Because if they use remittance for investment, that may be better for users remittance for consumption.
Yeah. Should I answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for a good question. So the highest data that collected by the government doesn't tell us about the use.
You just got to move across.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, the highest data collected by the TSD doesn't tell us, how people use remittances. But the labor mobility survey, collected by ANU and World Bank, actually included such a valuable information. And it's also shown in our report, because cited. Yeah, so but many people use remittances for just to cover daily expenses, and then also lots of people send money to churches donation. The church is really important. Also providing informal social protection in the country, and also some investment in education. But actually, I didn't really see much investment in business or whatever. So it's mostly just cover daily expenses. Yeah.
So you can make concern about sustainability.
Yeah, so exactly. So that's also an interesting point. So when I presented this report to the Prime Minister and Cabinet, when I was in Tonga, the Prime Minister of Tonga also asked me whether remittances can continue to provide support in case of crisis. But we don't know, right? So it's really kind of risky to just solely rely on remittances. It will continue to actually, be important, but at the same time, kind of addressing other domestic economic issues is really important. Yeah. So
I think you can answer the question if my colleagues finish the way two of chapter 5 and help panel later.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
Just a clarification question. When you said that if remittances were taken away, just doing a simple calculation, poverty would increase by 50%. Is that 50% of the 20% or 50%?
Yeah, exactly. So it's in terms of the poverty rate, jumping from 20 to 30.
Okay.
And that means in terms of the population per population, it's a 50% thing. So I guess I said the poor population increased by 50%. So but thank you for the clarification question. Yeah.
Thanks, Shohei, for your presentation. I have questions. First, what was the size of the social assistance program related to remittance over that period? And second is that given that remittance in percent of GDP is so high, so there should be some Dutch disease, right? So inflation should go up over this period. So that amount that the threshold poverty line, so 6058, was it adjusted for inflation?
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the scale of social spending, so it's around 0.7% of GDP, and the global standard is 1.5% GDP. So it's lower than the global average. And if you remember the size of remittances, it's 45%. So, so you can't compete. So then in terms of the inflation, also by the way, so I didn't present, but in my report, I can also simulated the impact of inflation in poverty. So if you're interested, please take a look at the report, because the inflation is really high in Tonga, even compared to other Pacific Island countries. Even now, many other countries already past peak and also actually going down, but Tonga actually prices remain high. So yeah, because of indeed, yeah, of course they import everything, but also yeah, remittances could have played a role. Yeah, so it definitely. So when I said providing support for people against shock, these shocks including not only natural disaster shocks but also economic shocks, which includes inflation. Yeah, and particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic era, the inflation was really high in Tonga. Yeah, so that was a really issue. And yeah, so in terms of your question, how this inflation was captured by the construction poverty line. Yeah, so so inflation actually doesn't matter when you measure poverty in a static way, right? So when the government measured poverty using 2021 highest, it was a really cross-sectional, so just a one-time shot. So yeah, price is like a spatial, cost of living differences, because the prices are different across island groups. So that subnational price differences were captured based on price index, and also interview. So the survey field work, was I guess for 10 months duration. So even for the 10 months duration, there was an inflation, right? So people interviewed at the beginning and people interviewed at the end of the field work. There was a 10 months difference. So prices were different. So this price inflation was adjusted as well. But the poverty line itself, the government didn't have to deal with inflation like a 10-year, 5-year inflation. It doesn't matter, but it does matter when we look at the poverty trend, right? So yeah, so the way we constructed poverty in 2015 was basically survey to survey imputation. So we developed a poverty prediction model using 2021 highs. Really just kind of, you could say, you can just think about simple OLS, So consumption left-hand side and the right-hand side includes many indicators, age, sex, education, location, jobs, right? So then you have the model, then you apply the prediction model to the data from 2015. So that means the consumption imputed for household in 2015 were actually already expressed in 2021 prices, because we developed the model from 2021 and then applied so also important, the right-hand side variables were all non-monetary, basically, like age, sex, education. So inflation doesn't really matter. So if you apply the model to 2015 highs, you'll get actually, you impute consumption for each household in 2021 prices. So yeah, so then you just have to apply the same poverty line, yeah, because everything is expressed in 2020 prices. Yeah, this is a kind of question I didn't receive, when I presented to the government. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I mean, how confident are you with that predictive model? Doesn't it imply basic stability in the economy that you've got you've got no way of testing?
Yeah, we kind of cross-validated, splitting the sample. But yeah, of course, so in our report, we try to say poverty have likely declined. Yeah, so of course, but the scale of the difference is really kind of huge, right? So even if we consider standard errors, it's clearly kind of there's a reduction. So maybe in terms of magnitude, we are maybe less confident, but the direction, it must be really kind of improvement in people's well-being, and also the trend in various non-monetary indicators also are consistently suggesting there was an improvement. Yeah.
But couldn't you have used the original monetary data and made an adjustment for the change in method? It seems to me you've just thrown away all that information.
Yeah, but they really changed the survey methodology. So diary to recall and paper to tablet and several other changes. Yeah, so actually, in 2021 highest, they also interviewed some people, like 300 households, using the previous diary approach to check the comparability, right? So, but actually unfortunately, they messed up. So we couldn't use it. So our original purpose was actually just look at the diary component between two surveys, to kind of validate our imputation results. But yeah, unfortunately, it was around the methodology to capture people eating like in restaurants or outside from home. That specific component they messed up, and that's actually huge, because many people nowadays actually spend a lot, for food outside the home, and it's actually not easy to capture. So, in the 2021 survey improved the methodology, and they didn't apply that to the diary component. So unfortunately, yeah, it didn't work. Yeah. So, but yeah, so it's not perfect, kind of result. Yeah. So, but the direction, yeah, we are relatively more confident. Yeah.
Okay, just sort of remind people online, please write down your questions. I don't think we've got any yet. So we'll take one more in the room. Right.
Sure, okay, I'll give you 3 questions then.
Very little time.
Two little puzzles, and then just a really quick one then. So the 2 puzzles that I'm trying to figure out is looking at the cross sections and the trends over time. There still seem to be quite big place premiums of sorts moving from the countryside to the main island, going urban rural. But then how do we reconcile that in your head as sort of encouraging internal migration as a way to improve your welfare versus what we see in terms of what appears to be very, very weak jobs demand and employment demand, presumably in the urban centres, and those huge non-participation rates in the labour market. That's my first puzzle there. I'm not sure how to reconcile. And then the second one is, I'm very happy attributing the poverty gains into labour mobility, as most in the room would expect. But we know that participation really positively selects people. It's not that poor people are not going in the scheme, not groups, if you're to do it across the distribution. So then how do we think about that mechanism and that channel then if they're not necessarily those ones selecting a need? Is it the fact that we don't actually have that extreme tail anyway, and therefore because the line's quite high, it's hitting like a few second and third decile rather than first decile type thing. And the really last easy question is, were you able to, in the report on that, similar to that question, show the sort of the consumption expenditure growth by decile and the change in the PDF over time? Because that, I think, give a really rich picture of what's going on in terms of inequality rather than the Gini, for example. Yeah, that's not very.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so maybe I should be kind of more precise. So maybe I shouldn't say the government should promote labor mobility. Maybe that might be not the case, because anyway people will move. So yeah, so actually the government doesn't have to promote or facilitate or encourage people. They will anyway move because of the lack of economic opportunities in the country. So yeah, it's more like a managing, the negative, results or effects from the rapid labor mobility. I guess that's more important. And yeah, so again, what I found interesting from the Pacific labor mobility survey was, so the seasonal workers in Australia and New Zealand, they send money not only to their immediate families or even relatives remaining in Tonga, they also send money to lots of other households, right? So maybe via church or, I don't know. So in Tonga, every weekend people, went to church and they had food there. And so it's really kind of mutual, helping mechanism is built there. But yeah, that's actually, I guess, made a difference. And that's why we saw reduction in inequality. So otherwise, for example, as you said, only people with skilled, better educated people can migrate and earn more and sending back money. And that, if that's the case, inequality will be actually increasing, right? But that was not the case in Tonga. So yeah, so lots of people, anyway, 90% of households received remittances. And also, if you look at the, if you look at the average amount of remittances received by consumption decile, so of course, richer households received a lot more remittances in terms of absolute amount of remittances. But in terms of relative size, like what percentage of consumption equivalent, coming from remittances, actually, there's not much difference, around 20-25% of GDP household consumption coming from remittances, regardless of consumption this side. So I don't remember. Maybe it's a bit different. You can take a look at the report, but actually there's not much difference. So poorer people anyway, receive remittances, similar relative scale as richer people. So it's a very interesting, and maybe it's just a coincidence. So there's no guarantee this kind of arrangement will continue. But so far that's the way remittances were sent and received. So contributing to reduction in inequality. And I have no clear answer, but when I presented this report yesterday in the World Bank Sydney office, one of my colleagues asked me, what if the government actually applies income tax, tax for remittances to make it more progressive? But I don't know. but I mean, that's maybe something the government can consider how to make. So far, as long as my analysis was correct, the country did a really great job reducing poverty and inequality thanks to remittances. But there's no guarantee this will continue, right? So so I have no clear answer, but so maybe it's really important for the government to think about, and also to do that, data is really important. And so I guess I'm really kind of looking forward to the second wave of Pacific Labor Mobility Survey, and also the TSD, the Tonga Statistics Department, will be starting the next high soon. So we'll see, again, another, layer of evidence, coming out. And so it's also the World Bank has been collecting monthly high frequency surveys in the country. So kind of synthesizing the results from these data sets. I think it's important to think about how to design policies, and so that's my kind of response here.
Okay. Well, we are out of time. I think there might have been some technical difficulties preventing the people online from asking questions in the chat. I'm sorry about that, but I'm sure you can get in touch with us or Shohei and follow up. I actually noticed in the World Bank multi-dimensional poverty measure that Tonga is the 4th least poorest country in the world. So the 4th richest.
Because there's no extreme poverty.
Has less poverty than Australia by that measure. So pretty impressive performance for a very small country. But that was a really interesting seminar. I think we all learned a lot, and there's a lot to think about remittances and diversification. So please join me in thanking our speaker, Shohei.